Okay, so if you're following these short video bites, you know what we've been building. And I'm going to continue with 2 more steps that bring in more of the human quality, that if we're in the dark cave and we have psychoacoustic sound and we have firelight and its shadows and we have flickering light modifying our brainwave state, being, I'm sure, shoulder to shoulder with others in our clan, in our family, starts to create a bonding process and a shared experience. It isn't just the shared experience of foraging for food, for example, but it's the shared experience of this altered primary consciousness, extraordinary quality of experience, and how within the human interaction that there's reinforcement, how there is interpretation. I could imagine that the younger, let's say the children, would feel confident to enter into this quality because they're surrounded by the adults and the parents. So it's a very early initiation into extraordinary mind, even for children, because as we understand psychology and neurology now, kids, that is where they are. It's a magical interpretation. One of my favorite books that I'm sorry that I left in California from Piaget, one of the famous, child psychologists, I forget the title of the book, just the whole book was a collection of children's interpretation of natural phenomena. Like, why does the sun come up on one side and go down the other? Like, why do clouds move? Why does it rain? And it is so charming, and yet at the same time, recognizing that, well, their ideas were quite similar to what we'll call mythic interpretations or pre-scientific interpretations. So even adults would tend to have this magical interpretation. For the Greeks, Apollo in his chariot, rides across the sky. And you think, well, that's kind of a funny way of interpreting it. But even for adults in these societies, interpretations were essentially magical. We would say magical. So it would make a lot of sense to me that the communal experience where children are growing up in this, I keep on coming back to, magical, because I think we understand what that means, a kind of a magical interpretation of things, and that these adults would have a very similar interpretation, with going down deep into the subcaverns for the kids and the adults was probably very similar. It's like, oh shit, this is really something special. This is different. What kind of difference? Well, then the imagination starts to try to fill in the blanks. And I think now, with something like our NeuroVIZR, if we're willing to allow some of that magical thinking to maybe enhance our scientific thinking. I'm not saying trading one for, I don't over-romanticize the early brain. I would prefer to have my brain now, knowing that I still have a prehistoric brain in there, that I can use that prehistoric evolution to my advantage. It's not like one is bad and one is good. There is facility. And I think oftentimes that even though we pretend to be scientific in our explanations, those are kind of infused with some kind of magical quality that we may not own up to all that much. There is a book by Eric Davis, Technosis, that explores the recent evolution with advanced technology in relation to consciousness. So tech like technology, and gnosis like Gnostic, mystical wisdom. Technosis, his argument is that as scientific as we are now, we still maintain this tendency and capacity, consciously or not, to have a kind of a magical interpretation of what's going on. And I think it's because the deep, bold, and critically important roots of the prehistoric brain are still neurologically in our brain and are accessible, consciously or unconsciously. From the neuroanthropologists, they have a term as a concept. I guess I like it. I think it's true. They say that our brain has neurognostic structures. Gnostic, like Gnosticism, like mystical knowledge, that our brain has a neurological capacity for these experiences that are not pathological, they're not aberrations. Like we say here with the NeuroVIZR, that both ordinary mind, ordinary brain, and extraordinary mind, extraordinary brain, all of these are normal, natural, and healthy. They just need to be used in certain ratios and proportions, but we need them both. So I would imagine that the communal clan intimacy of this experience would allow a generation to generation to generation evolution of myth and magic and story and rationale. Because sometimes, you know, when you do a NeuroVIZR session, I call it accessing a kind of knowing without thinking. There is some kind of, it's both maybe foreign and familiar at the same time. So what's going on here? I think that the huge benefit that comes from, at certain times, to certain degrees, or certain periods of time, letting go of logic and order and predictability into the delight, the joy, the surprise of something that is both unknown and familiar at the same time, that is part of psychological health. I think it's at the root of humor, as a matter of fact. So, one last thing. It's the human voice.